It's Pete from Cheap Homesteading. I'm in the garage today and we're working on a Stihl MS260. My friend brought it over and the handle was broken on it and there's a fuel leak. So we decided to go and get an aftermarket fuel tank just because it was a better price than the OEM tank. There's a few companies that make aftermarket parts for those chainsaws, but Holzfforma makes pretty good parts, and they have a whole line of them pretty much for both types of chainsaws. So, and it comes with a fuel line, fuel filter, trigger, everything. It's ready to go. So we are going to install this on this chainsaw. So let's go. You know, these chainsaws, they make more and more parts out of plastic, and you know, you drop your saw or your saw gets pinched and pretty well you break something because it's made out of plastic. And I mean, I think that's just kind of how it has been and how it is going. So pretty well everything's going to be plastic in the next few years, I would assume anyways. Put that over to the other side. The first thing we're going to do is remove the air filter cover. Wow, that is dirty. I think I'm going to blow this all off, so I probably should take the top cover off too. Okay, so I'm going to blow off the whole chainsaw. Okay, so that looks a whole lot better. Okay, so we're going to remove one screw that's at the base of the handle. It is a torque screw, but it has a slot for a flat head screwdriver. So I'm just going to use a flathead screwdriver. There we go. Screw over here. This comes off. So it's basically so you can disconnect your throttle linkage. So we're going to remove these two nuts that hold the carburetor in place. They're 8mm. So now we're going to remove this mount. I'm going to take this screw off. And then the whole piece comes off. So on this side, there's a little nylon plug that goes in here with two little slots, and you pry up, and you pry up, and then the whole thing just pops out. And you remove that bolt. You know, you can save tons of money by just doing this stuff yourself. It's a good skill to have. And you can make a little bit of money with it. This little screw holds this plate on. We're just going to remove that. Now you have another one of these plugs. And you have to try to pop that one out. And the same thing, you remove the bolt for the front mount. Stihl makes really, really good products, but I don't know what it is. These companies know there's aftermarket parts out there, and they still continue to charge top dollar for their stuff. If any company should be able to actually produce parts cheaply, it should be the OEM. But for years, OEM companies like Stihl and Husqvarna have decided to charge what they've always charged, an exorbitant amount of money for their parts. And I think in the next few years, you're going to start seeing Stihl and Husqvarna lowering the price of their parts because maybe they're going to make less, but they're going to get more of the market. And if they don't do that, chances are they won't continue to exist. And people think, oh, there's no way Stihl will ever go under. You know what? If they keep continually charging a lot of money for their parts and their saws, and you have other companies that start coming up that can produce them at half the price, people are going to start going somewhere else. Because there are some really good cheaper chainsaws out in the market now, which they just didn't have before. They didn't have that competition. We're going to pull on the carburetor, and it's going to slide out. Make sure that the linkage stays free. Okay. Okay, so it's off. We got to remove the fuel line. Uh-oh. I didn't relieve the pressure. Make sure you release the pressure and then put the cap back on it. Or when you take it off, the carburetor is just going to push its way out with a screwdriver, and just give it a quick little pop up, and then it slides out of this side of the tank. This piece just pulls out of the plastic lever. Let me set that over there for now. Down in here, there's a wire, and if you pull that way, it just slides out. So now we pull all the wires out and free. Those are your shut-off wires. So now you've got this little ring. And we're going to try to just pop that off. It's a little metal ring. Slides back. So then there's a little collar on the inside. You pull that off and set it over here. Okay, so now we're going to pull on the handle a little bit, and we're going to try to shove this grommet inside here. You don't want to use a screwdriver or anything like that. You do not want to puncture that and not know. So down here you have a pulse line, and you got to push that through. The same kind of thing, you want to be careful that you don't actually puncture it. So what that line does, it comes from the bottom of the crankcase and hooks to your carburetor. It's actually the fuel pump part of your carburetor, and that's what makes it pump fuel. You don't want to puncture it. This one's a little bit tougher, so you can kind of start pushing it down through the little lip. But whatever you do, don't puncture the line. Almost there. So there you go. It is free of the tank. Okay, we're gonna blow this off. We're gonna install the new tank. See this little pin here? That has to go over the edge. And now we have to get this pulse line on the back part of the carburetor, which probably could be a pain. There you go, it's on. So I used needle nose and I shoved it on. And we're going to try to fit this intake tube. It's not all the way through. You try to just pull on it. There you go. She popped through. So you have your pulse line is hooked onto your engine block. Your intake tube has come through. So now you got your little ring, and you have to shove that into the center of the hole. And you slide that over the studs and push it all the way down, and it fits directly around the bushing. So now that I got all the lines installed, I'm going to install this mount and the other 3 mounts that hold this on. Reason being, I just want it to be a little more sturdy. I don't want to accidentally pull off any of those lines and not notice. So once this is actually installed, it will actually be nice and sturdy. So this little clip holds against this wire, so this side goes on. This bottom one goes into steel, but this goes into plastic, so you have to be careful when you tighten this up that you don't go crazy tightening this one up. All these screws are different. This one has a short shoulder. This one has a longer shoulder. You got to make sure that you put them in the right spot. The one with the short shoulder goes on these mounts down here. You want them to be tight, but you don't want to break the plastic. Okay, now we'll do the front one. Same thing. We got the tank installed. I'm just going to pop this back in. There's a little slot here and a little slot here. So when you put the plug in, it kind of has to be this way. Which correspond with your little tangs here. Make sure it's all clean. Install the screw. There you go. So we're going to flip this saw over. I am going to remove this screw. And now we got the carburetor. I'm going to shove it on the fuel line, and I'll do it kind of out here because it makes it just a little bit easier. Make sure it's shoved on all the way. Now you're going to pull it over gently and get it on the studs and shove the carburetor in place. These little rubber pieces have to make sure they don't catch. You get them in there. This will line up into the housing and you just shove it into place. Make sure that the fuel line didn't get kinked. And make sure that your little pulse signal line is installed and it didn't get shoved out or anything. So there you go, that's in there. When you have the carburetor a little bit out, you slide the throttle linkage in between here and here, and there's a little notch in the throttle linkage and it'll stick on this part. That first little curl sticks out, but it's the second bend that actually goes into the lever for your throttle. Your little safety lock, the spring goes underneath the pivot and it hooks on the lever. In the bottom. So when you tighten these up, you make sure that you tighten them up evenly. Don't tighten one side up and then tighten the other, because you want it to be pulled in nice and even and straight. And remember, it goes into plastic. We have our shut-off wires. We fish them through one at a time. We're going to get the needle nose pliers, pull that out, get the other one. Okay, so now we're going to just shove it into the control lever with a pair of needle nose. So the other one will get shoved in that hole. We're going to install the air filter. So we got to put the handle back on. The long screws go up here. I'm just going to tighten them up just a little bit, not all the way. And the short screws with just a little bit of a shoulder go on the bottom. And then finally tighten up everything. That is a T25. Most of the bolts on this are a T25 torque socket. Put the top cover on. Okay, and the air cleaner cover. There you go. Put the bar on and we are good to go. Give it a little bit of fuel. So there you go, it's back up and running. It runs pretty good. I am going to have to adjust the carb a little bit. It's running a little rich. But other than that, this job is finished. So you guys have a good one.